All right, welcome to Thursday. Thanks for joining us. We have a very informative webinar today focused on driving traffic into your store using data-driven marketing and automation. All right, so we're hearing from many of our retailer friends in our P2 groups and our NBDA members that a big challenge facing retailers today is how we increase traffic. And we're determined to find some solutions for you. So we got together with a couple experts in the field, and we have a great conversation that we hope will leave you with a lot of ideas to charge forward. We're going to touch on meaningful traffic, campaigns, automations, content suggestions. So before we dive in today, I want to welcome our guests and thank Scott and Kristin who have joined us. So we have Scott Buelter, a good friend of the NBDA, CEO of Ascent 360. And we also have NBDA retailer member, Kristin Sudin Brandt. She's president of Sundin Marketing and co-owner and marketing manager at Steve the Bike Guy. Frequent on our Monday mingles and very active with her NBDA membership. So thrilled to have both Scott and Kristin join today. Maybe we should start with some quick introductions. Scott, do you want to just introduce you, Ascent 360, in your role?
Sure, absolutely. So I know a lot of you, but my name is Scott Buelter, founder and CEO of Ascent 360. We've been building, relationship software for about 12 or 13 years now, so it's been a while. It's probably worth saying, before Ascent 360, I was at a really large database marketing company called Merkle, and we built databases for Disney and Nike and Royal Caribbean and Dell. And in a sense, what I got to see there was literally like the best of the best, right? $20-30 million budgets on relationship marketing, and I could see what was really bleeding edge. And interestingly, what was bleeding edge like back then isn't really even bleeding edge today, because technology has moved so quickly. But nonetheless, got, if you will, a foundation to say, hey, this is the sort of work we want to do at Ascent 360, right? We want to make this stuff really simple, but the ideas are there. So that's a little bit of background.
We're thrilled you're here, and I know many of our NBDA retailer members are working with Ascent 360 and reporting some really positive results using their data and doing specific campaigns that are very targeted. So lots to get into because we really want to arm all of our participants today with some great information to go forward. Kristin, I'll turn it over to you if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Sure. As you said, I'm president of Sundin Marketing. We're a full service marketing and advertising agency outside of Boston. I've been a professional communicator for over 25 years, mostly in the financial and banking space. So a lot of experience with data and data usage. And then about, 10 years ago, my husband started Steve the Bike Guy, and we opened the shop. Actually, it was probably 11 years ago. We opened the shop 9 years ago this month. And so, I've been over that time applying all that knowledge from one industry into a different industry. It turns out banks and bike shops, not that different. They're service-based industries. They're selling a lot of the same things, right? Bikes, and it comes down to people and stuff like that. So so that's who I am. And we've been using the Ascent system for over a year. We just renewed. And it's been great to be able to really put our data to use to work for us.
Kristin, thanks for joining, and you've been great helping the NBDA with our continuing education classes and been a fantastic member. For our retailers who have joined us today, I know there are dozens of you on the webinar today. We want this to be a very informative session for you. I have a lot of pointed questions to ask our experts, but we also want to allow time for your questions to be answered. The most important thing we can do is make sure that we cover the topics and questions that you have. So we'll go through the beginning of today's webinar with me asking our experts several questions that I think will generate a lot of great insights. But at any time, if you have questions, please put them into the chat, and we'll make time at the end of the webinar to answer those. So let's just kick off, talking about making sure we're communicating with our customers in the right way. How do we get the traffic back in the door? Do we do these drip campaigns? What's happening? What is even data data-driven marketing. Scott, why is this an important conversation? And just kick us off. Maybe some people don't even know what data-driven marketing is.
Yeah, there's really a lot of terms that people use to try to describe some of the same thing, right? Some people might call it customer relationship marketing. And you say, well, okay, but if you're trying to build a relationship with someone, you can't really do that like through mass marketing. And what you're really talking about is, well, how do you do like very close touch, personalized marketing with lots of people? And once you get above, let's just call it 100 people, just think of your own friend set, right? You can't do it. You can't do it without some knowledge of who those people are. So I think the idea is, look, if you've got data that tells you something about your customer, and that is, they're a female, they're 55 years old, they have visited the website, they purchased a specialized road bike 3 weeks ago, right? Those are all like data points, and every single one of those can be used to market in a really sort of more familiar and friendly way. And so I guess I would say that the way to think about data-driven marketing is, how do you think about the data you have, and how do you use that in a way that makes your conversation relevant with the person you're talking to.
I think it really is an art form, because when I get an outreach, a communication from a place that I have shopped and it feels like it's just for me, I definitely open it. But when I get something that's like, I don't know, about a tractor or something, I'm like, this is not for me. Well, let's get a feel of what it is like right now in the current landscape. Kristin, you are co-owner of a store, a bicycle store. How is business currently? What's the climate looking like for getting new people in the door? I mean, even working as the market at the marketing firm, is this beyond our industry? Are people seeing a general?
I mean, absolutely. We see it. We've heard the conversation on the Monday Mingles, people talking about the challenge of people getting in the door. We see it in our banks. People, why aren't people coming back into the lobby? Part of that is, over the pandemic, we did a lot of work to change their behavior. We introduced appointments, and we introduced online sales, and we introduced all these ways so that they didn't have to come to visit us. And now we're like, well, why aren't they coming to visit us? Because in part we did that, right? So across the board, I think I know that everyone's seeing a challenge. We see foot traffic is down across the board in retail, in banking. I think part of it is just we have to kind of redefine the door, and what it means to get them in the door. Is getting them back to the website to buy something? Is that getting them in the door? And then we also just have to look at meaningful traffic, because I mean, one joke I made was, I'm in New England, right? If I get Tom Brady to come hang out at my shop, sure, I'll get people in the door. But are they going to be people who want to buy a bike or want to buy accessories or signing up for so it's like everything we think about doing when it comes to getting them in the door is like, well, how is that going to be strategic? So maybe it is, you're getting them in because you're getting a contest, you're going to collect email addresses, but then what are you going to do with those email addresses? Because if you have no plan for that, then all you did was you had a party, so those are the things you really have to think about, but recognize that we did this in part, like strategically, it was a good move, but now that we've explained to everyone why they don't have to come, they're not coming.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the effects of COVID and how we did train our customers to interact with us in a different way. And the topic of traffic versus meaningful traffic, that is a conversation that's come up in our P2 groups, is like, okay, well, we get them in the door, but we can't close them, or we have this event, but really, what's the ROI? Maybe, Scott, I would flip this over to you. Maybe just the difference between traffic and meaningful traffic, and then how data-driven marketing can help us attract the meaningful traffic.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to consider it, and I think of myself as a shopper as well, right? There's an endless set of little towns I like walking around with my wife and walking into bike stores. and I'm probably not meaningful traffic, especially when, you know, we're on a vacation and we're like literally not shopping, but I like to look at the bikes. I think the at least one thing to kind of contemplate is that, like, the customers, you know, and the most recent customers that you've got are the most likely next customer. And this is a really tough concept to grasp, but it's so fundamentally true, and it's true across industries, and it's been true for 50 years. And so what you'd say is that a recent customer or a recent buyer is the most likely next customer. And that's also somewhat true for this idea of frequency and spend, meaning that the people who bought from you in the past, that's where your future revenue is going to come from. So I think what you want to try to achieve is not just saying, hey, we want new people to come in the door, right? Finding a prospect and selling to that prospect is a really, really hard task, right? The statistics around like what it costs to get a new prospect and win them, it's actually daunting. And so what I would suggest is like making sure that you try to get your good customers back in the door. And there's a lot of tactics you can do to this. I know we're gonna talk about sort of post-purchase, but if in fact we're just talking about prospecting, right? Let's kind of set up an idea. If somebody were to fill out, you know, sign up for on your website for the newsletter, right? You should ask yourself, like, what actually just happened? Did someone just, like, they didn't know what they were doing and it was 2 a.m. and they accidentally signed up? Or is this person actually telling you, like, I'm in the market for a bike, I'm on your site because I'm looking at bikes, and that most likely is what's happening. And, you know, you could certainly extend that sign up to ask a question like, are you interested in road, mountain, or commuter? And now all of a sudden you know something. And like, that's the traffic that you want to get in, right? This guy just raised their hand and they said, I'm interested and I'm in the market. Maybe they're hoping you're going to auto send them a 20% off coupon or something. I wouldn't recommend doing that, right? But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be sending them a personalized email to say, we'd love to bring you into the store. We've got, you know, a bike fitter, we've got lots of inventory, and we carry, right, 9 brands or whatever that is. And it should be personal, like this sort of just blanket welcome email that says, oh, you're part of the newsletter now. Like, that isn't going to bring in meaningful traffic. I think the opposite is just to say, let's get super specific and talk to that person like they're a person.
Oh my God, that sounds like the perfect thing to do, right? But it sounds really challenging and really hard.
Well,
I mean, Kristin, what do you have to add there?
I was going to say, just to reinforce what he was talking about with your current customers being your next customers, like, I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to email marketing. When I talk to clients, is the idea that, well, they're already a customer, so they're just going to come to us. They're just going to remember us. And the reality is that we find that, first of all, no one's thinking of us as much as we are, right? Nobody's like, oh, Steve the bike guy, of course. Like, they're just like, oh, my bike, and oh, I passed this bike shop, so I stop. So it's the idea that you need to kind of stay in front of them to remind them we're all busy. We're all just, and I will say, every single time we send out an email, whether it's a newsletter or an announcement, there's inevitably appointments come in, sales come in immediately, and they're all customers. So it's just this idea that, you know, we expect that everyone's thinking of us as much as we're thinking of us, and that is just not the case. And that's what email, this, whether it's, you know, email newsletters or blasts or whatever, however describe them, that's where the real power of them is.
Yeah, these are powerful reminders. Like, we have this newsletter sign up that exists, right? But what are we actually doing with it? And then the other part, the piece that you just mentioned, that, you know, we might be communicating and we think we're communicating a lot, but it's not always getting to the people because they're not thinking about us, or they're not checking their email as often, or they might just miss it completely. So we do need to resend these messages and be thoughtful of it.
And we use social media. Like, it's really common for me to see banks and bike shops that are like throwing a ton of content on social media, which has declining organic reach. Like people are not seeing that, and yet they won't send out the same exact stuff in a newsletter. Like that's, that's really where you're like, you're doing the work and you have the content. You're just not getting it to the people that are most likely to be interested in it.
Yeah. All right. So I want to talk about content. Before I do that, maybe this is a good spot to ask. I mean, Scott, you work with retailers in multiple industries, not just bike. I know ski as well. We've had you on before talking about, examples from the ski industry, but examples of successful campaigns, maybe in the bike industry specific, that have used data-driven marketing to drive people into physical stores. Anything that you would share there?
Yeah, there's a few tactics which I would almost call something like table stakes, or just like required reading, or whatever the right word is for this. And I would actually guess that 85% of the bike dealers that work with us have some sort of post-purchase stream that is driving towards a free tune-up after you buy a bike, right? So come in 30 days later, we'll tune up the cables for you, we'll tighten the cables, we'll check the brakes, or whatever all that is. And it's very intentional to get somebody to come in to the store, and by the time you get to 30 days by the time that that you don't have gloves, you would like a pair of shorts that the padding actually is there, and your helmet doesn't wiggles on your chin, or whatever all those things are. And so when people come in for that free tune-up, we see that they buy accessories on the day they drop it off, and then we see they buy other stuff on the day that they pick the bike back up. And that just works. And strangely, we see people buy bikes on those, right? And I think often it probably works like this, right? You buy yourself a bike, and then you come home and your wife or girlfriend is like, what in the world? Like, you're driving this sweet new bike, and mine is 6 years old. And then they end up buying a second bike. And I'd say that, like, getting them back in during that phase is really fundamentally important. There's so many easy places to go to buy all that same stuff. One of them is Amazon, and they don't even need to leave the house. So try to bring them into the store through that sort of mechanism. It certainly works. I think there's a lot of other strategies that probably are a little bit more based on your store and what you do. But I'll give you a good example. One of our clients, they have an email that goes only to, it's post-purchase, but it goes only to people who spent over some amount, and I think it's like $3,000. And it has the picture of the store manager, has the store manager's email, and it has the store manager's cell phone number, with the idea that, like, this person should be calling the store manager if they need anything, or want anything, because they're a valuable customer. And that also ends up bringing people back into the store. It builds a connection, and it actually does end up with people like reaching out and building relationships. They're totally outside of a marketing system. Right now, it's just becoming like personalized communication that's well worth it for high value customers.
Sounds very personalized. And I know using a platform, it's, I don't want to say simple, but it's easy. It takes a lot of stress off the retailer to have to like manually do things. You can just set it and kind of let it run.
The place, I mean, I think for us that and let me say, like, on the banking side, I would kill for a system like this one, right? Like but the things are automated that I don't have to think about. So we have a couple of plays, like we had the lapsed customer, because we hadn't done the system for a while. So anyone who hadn't come to visit and made a purchase in over a year, those just run. We have one that's after you pick up your bike from a service versus after a sale. Those are differentiated messaging, at saying different things, making separate offers. The fact that I don't have to, I can just go in them, check them, see how they're running. I will probably refresh them, you know, every 6 months or so, but that's really powerful, particularly when you are understaffed. For us, one of the things that we do is that for our Saturday services, we have a team. The team is based on a very simple thing. Did you buy a kit? And so the system knows if they bought a kit. I can send an email just to the team. I don't have to like find them. I just send that to the team and I say, by the way, we're opening an hour early for Saturday service for teammates. If you need something that's, you know, so it's like that ability to focus on content over lists. That's again where these systems like these are really helpful, because you know you're not so much like who am I sending it to. That set, what am I saying to them is what becomes important.
So you can get a lot done like in a little bit of time and make sure your messages are going to the right person and the return is pretty big. I like what you're saying. I'm also more of a person who I think when I see things, I get like a better idea of actually how it works. So maybe for our retailers who have joined us on the call, Scott, could you just like maybe walk us through what it is like to set up a campaign, maybe for someone who hasn't shopped with us in 4 years, or I don't know, just give us an example of how easy this would be, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. I'm actually going to share my screen then because it's better than trying to describe it. And I'll do this in 60 seconds, right? So what you're really saying is, hey, I want to send an email to someone who bought a bike 7 days ago. And all you really need to do is come and say, well, I want the purchase details, right? These are the things that they purchased. And it's going to be based on the transaction date, and it's going to be based on the top level category. And in the top level category, we can say, well, they bought a bike. That's our bike category. And in the transaction date, I want to say it's actually equal to like 7 days before today, right? So yeah, that's 7 days ago. I can hit save here, and I can even say, well, are there, you know, I know that I sold, you know, some number of bikes 7 days ago. I can hit this little fresh to say, well, are there people that this is gonna touch? And yep, 22 of them, and one is unsubscribed. So now I just say I'm going to save this, and I'm going to call it, you know, 7-day post purchase. And then I just need to choose an email that I want to automate. So I'll go to emails. I'll go to my designs. I'll say, okay, this is the email that I want to send. Now, the building of the email is probably the piece that takes the most effort by far. We do have a bunch of templates, and we're actually coming out with a series of bike specific templates this quarter. So, you know, kind of wait for that. But you just say, hey, this is the email. I want to go send it. And who do I want to go send it to? Who do I want to go send it to? It's going to be that audience called 7-day post purchase. And it says it's got 22 people in it. I'm going to hit save. And you know, you've got a couple other fields to kind of roll through in terms of properties, you know, what's the subject line? But importantly, say like, I want this to go out every day, starting tomorrow at 11:30 in the morning Mountain Time. And I want this to go daily. And now, whoops, oh, this has to happen in the future. Yes. Okay. So now I've effectively, if I hit this continue button, I'm ultimately going to set this thing up to send every time someone buys a bike. And so, you know, I guess I'd like to say, I know the software really well, and it, you know, only took me whatever 60 seconds to do that. Granted, you got to build an email, but I hope the sense of it is, hey, this just isn't that hard to go do. Yep. There was a question, will the template be available to all subscribers? Yes, that's right. We're in the process of building both a series of templates for bike and a series of template for jewelry customers. And we're just going to kind of continue down so that, you know, all these templates are available, and they will effectively look like, you know, a post purchase and a welcome, and, you know, the things that we think make sense. And granted, you're going to put your own logo into it and all that sort of stuff, but hopefully it'll be a good kickstart.
I feel like the biggest challenge with systems, like any system, anything where you can do any onboarding, is there so many directions you can go. It feels like drinking out of a fire hose. And so, I always recommend with our clients who might be doing onboarding, right? Who are like, oh, you opened a new account. And then within one day we send this, and there's the 777. There's all sorts of different philosophies on how many times. It's like, pick one, right? Like if you sit there and you can get analysis, paralysis by analysis, right? That you are like, well, do this and this one and this one and this one and this one and this one. You're like, yep, you can do all of those someday. Start with the big ones, right? The lapsed customer, the you came and bought something, right? You came and bought a bike, like you bought like the big things, and then you can get into the niches, right? You're a mountain biker, and we're gonna do something about shocks, and we're gonna do it. Like you can do all that stuff, assuming the data is there, but it's like it can feel really overwhelming. And then you kind of, even we came into this, and I think it took me 6 months. We had the system, and I was like, oh, I really should be doing more plays, because it just gets overwhelming.
Yeah.
So I get it. So do it like what Scott just showed us. Set up like the post purchase. Just get into it. Get your feet. And then when you have time, maybe select out who bought a dual suspension mountain bike and send them an invitation to like a ride or a clinic you're doing, but get the standard ones set up and go.
Start big and then start filtering down to littler, and also keep in mind, look at those lists and be like, am I building something? And there's 4 people, like do those lists first. So you can be like, I'm spending a lot of time trying to do this thing, and it turns out nobody qualifies, right? Versus, 1,000 people qualify, 500 people qualify. So, there's ways to kind of help you focus your attention, and don't feel like you can do it all at once, because you can't. Yeah. It should be system. You're kind of maturing into this. You're maturing into your database. I mean, I know for us, we moved from something terrible to Lightspeed. And like when we even came in, Steve and I had to have conversations about like how he was categorizing stuff, because he was categorizing stuff by brand. And I was like, well, yeah, but some people have Scott road bikes and some people have Scott mountain bikes. And it turns out I don't care if they have a Scott. I care if they have a mountain bike or road bike or a gravel bike. Like, so we had to kind of look at even, how were our categories set up, because it's not, that is a lot up to you. So, so our database as our database has matured, there are more emails going out than there were even a year ago.
Yeah. And so I know Ascent 360 works with Lightspeed, Shopify, WooCommerce, BigCom, and has a seamless integration with Ascend. And we've been talking, for many months, years now, about the importance of collecting email addresses, letting the customer know, like, we're going to use this only to communicate with you about important stuff. Scott, what if we're at an event? Like, I'm so old school. I used to go to events with my clipboard and collect email addresses on the clipboard. So say I have all these email addresses that need to get entered. Can I then, talking about reaching out to the new customer, the new prospect, any tips there?
Well, so I'll tell you, if I were going to go to an event, what I would do is I would make a little sign up form. You can do that in our tool, and I would show it on an iPad. And I would then communicate with those people about what just happened, right? Which was the event. And now you've got a bunch of people. I mean, let's just assume the event has something to do with biking. Now you've got a bunch of people who you actually know have some interest in the sport that you can now communicate with. And again, I would do it in as personal a way as possible. And I really do think that people respond to personal emails. And I'll give you an example, and this is a little outside of biking, but we had a ski client meet with us and talk strategy. And they had all these kind of like big ideas, but somewhere in the meeting, someone said, like, do you ever thank your customers? And they kind of like, well, never have. And that didn't really cross our mind. And we're like, look, we know skiing, and we know that there are people who basically raise their children on the mountain. It's like, 3-4 generations of people that, the grandparents went there, then the parents went there, the kids are there. And so they're like, oh my God, this is a great idea. So they put an email together, created an audience, and sent it to, it went to about 500 people that had been customers for like 8 years or more, and it spent thousands and thousands of dollars. And it wasn't like a flashy marketing email. It was like a genuine, like, thank you, right? Thanks for being a customer. And the response they got from that was just fantastic. So, the way they set it up was actually that you could reply to the email, and it would actually come to the inbox back of the person who sent it, which was the owner of the mountain. And he just got all these fantastic, like, oh my God, I love this mountain. I was here, I learned to ski here when I was 5, and my kids are 5, and all these sorts of things. And the only reason I'm kind of going on about it is that I really think you don't always need to say, hey, we're just trying to like get some offer in front of them or a coupon in front of them. Like, let's talk to them about things that they care about, right? Say, like, look, we're doing a bike safety training, or how do you ride at night, or like all sorts of things that you can talk to people about that they really care about. And those new prospects, like the ones that you just found at that event, well, you can talk to them about something that is really relevant to them, and they are going to read it, and they are going to open it up. If all you send them is like whatever newsletter you sent 6 months ago, it's it isn't going to work in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. And like if I was doing bike fitting or anything like that too, that's super personal, and I might throw that out, the services that we offer. Kristin, you've been using Ascent 360, you've set up these automated campaigns. How are you measuring, or how can you track if people are actually coming in off the emails?
Yeah, I mean, so any system is going to give you, and any email system, so I've used lots of email systems. Let me start with that. Any email marketing system is going to give you some reports. It should tell you how many times an email was opened, who opened it, how many times they opened it, what links they clicked, which I think is always interesting just from a like what resonated, what didn't, right? Like if you get one thing that got clicked a lot, you're like, okay, maybe that's a topic we should talk more about. Those are helpful. Unsubscribes is another big one, because once they unsubscribe, we cannot put them back. That would violate canned spam. Like, so if there's a high unsubscribe, that means we're doing something wrong with our content. It's too salesy, it's off topic, it's not personalized enough. Some of those are really good, helpful. They're a little bit vanity metrics, right? Like how many they opened. I don't get paid by an advertising dollar, so it doesn't really matter how many times something was opened. I do want to see if I have a good open rate. But ultimately, it comes down to the dollars, right? Like, are we selling product? And so sometimes, like with this system, it will try to equate, and I'm not even going to try to explain how it does that. I'll leave that to Scott. But it does equate like sales after a certain amount of time that an email was sent. Sometimes it's anecdotal, right? Somebody will be like, oh, they replied, and be like, the email the bike I saw in this email, because all of the replies do come to us. I saw this bike, I think it's perfect for my son, can I come and check it out? So those are the things that we look for, is actual sales, and if not sales, inquiries, right? Actual inquiries, butts in saddles, that they came to check it out, conversations about bikes. Because it's not always going to be a direct, like, we sold 10 bikes. It's going to be, I talked to this guy, long tail, she came in, this woman came in. So there's lots of kind of metrics for success.
Excellent. That's fantastic feedback. And then we talked about using our data to post drip to the people who just purchased, maybe reach out based on a lapsed time frame. Are there other searches that, thinking about the content that we're using for our campaigns, are there other searches that we could use from the data that we have, Scott?
Well, I think the one that is probably least utilized and maybe the most powerful by far is abandoned cart and abandoned browse. And I say it's least used because we've got a little bit of code you can throw onto your website that then tracks people. And if we can know who they are because they click through an email, then we can know that they were browsing around your website, but they didn't buy anything, or they put something into a cart and they didn't buy anything. And like just Google like success metrics around abandoned cart and abandoned browse. They're obscenely successful, and that is something I would recommend everybody get set up. If you don't know how to do it, we've got help docs, or you can set up time with one of our specialists, right? There's something on our website that says set up time. So because that's maybe something you'd want help with. But I would really recommend getting those set up. And then I think anything that is sort of data driven, right? Any sort of life event. If you know their birthday, if you know when they bought their bike a year ago, tell them it was a year ago. Tell them it was 2 years ago, and hey, there's new technology out, and all those sorts of things. It actually kind of hit me the other day that the bike that I bought is about 4 years old, even though it seems like I just got it. I don't know how time travels so quickly.
It has no meaning anymore.
That's right. I guess the older I get, the quicker it goes.
Exactly.
But like anything that you can kind of utilize data with, I would engage on that. And then I think it's also worth just talking about those sort of ideas of recency, frequency, and monetary, or are they lapsed? Every one of those data points can effectively help drive something that is automated. And then again, once it's automated, like you don't really need to do anything other than maybe address for seasons, right? Because you don't want a big sunny picture in the middle of winter.
I mean, keep in mind too that automation can help you move things in the calendar, for example. So it doesn't have to be 1 year from service. It could be, let's say 1 year from service is like the last time you want them to schedule a service because you're super busy because they came in at peak season last time. So what instead do 7 months? For 7 months from the last time they came in, just be like, hey, do you want to get ready for the season now? Now might be a great time for you to come in. So it can help even solve for some maybe challenges that you might be having. And then other things that could be date based could be like your helmet part. You talked about your bike, but like helmets supposedly need to be replaced after a certain amount of time. Well, if they bought helmets from you and that, then within that time period, you certainly could be talking about it. You should be careful a little bit of seeming too big brother, too creepy. Like, hey, you bought your helmet 4 years ago and you need a new one. But certainly I think there's ways to use the data that's like, oh, did you know that helmets should be replaced within a certain amount of time? Like we do kind of more that way. Like, did you know that you should probably get a light because you're commuting?
Not the super creepy 4 years ago on this date.
You can be really creepy. Yeah. Like we talk about this in banking too, because like we know so much, but you can't like send an email that's like, I happen to know you have 4 savings accounts and this much in your savings, you own this. Like people would be like, I mean, like, I know but I don't need to be reminded that Thanks.
Yeah. I was going to add an example of that sort of time shifting. So one of our clients actually sells a lot of racks, and what ends up happening is during like the spring busy season, when they're trying to sell bikes, people are coming in because they lost their lock and they're trying to figure out how do they get new keys. And it's like, first of all, they're in a panic because they're literally leaving that day on some trip. And so they just start sending emails earlier in the season to say, like, spring is coming. Do you know where your locks are? And this is a lock for the rack. I don't mean a bike lock. And like it works, right? Because then people start thinking about it and realizing that, oh yeah, we are taking that trip and I need to get the lock fixed or whatever, a new one.
Yep, those reminders. Oh God, there's so much here. So I want to dive over to content a little bit, because I feel like it's easy to send a sale message out or an event message out. but I've heard the word personalized come up a lot. So I want to ask Kristin, I want to ask you this, any best practices for creating content that really resonates with people and gets them to come? It's not a sale, or
no,
maybe
it's not. Like those are a category of emails I often call blasts, right? Like, and they have their place, right?
Yeah.
50% off, sale, but like they're one off, they're hit hard, they're done.
10 sales.
But yeah, and they're effective. But for like ongoing communications, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, dear Heather, thanks for like, I think sometimes we think of personalization as like being super like granularly. I think it just needs to speak to, are our messages adding value to the relationship, right? Is it worth their time to read it? Whether that's, maybe it is about a sale, but you're just talking about, the fact that you're cleaning out the shop and you're helping them, kind of part of the behind the scenes type stuff. I find really small shops in particular, I think people feel very connected to the shops. And so we get a lot of response to just the like behind the scenes, how shops run, what makes us tick. And again, like the content you're creating for social media is as long as it's good, solid content, is what feeds newsletters. Like it's all kind of connected to each other. Photos of people in kits, stories of the bikes that you've sold, not the just like dude came in, bought bike, left, but this was the challenge that was happening, right? This is the family that came in. This is how we met those needs. This is how, what problems we solve. That's when we talk about personalized, I think, where we really have a lot of power. You can then get deeper than that. If again, you have a mountain bike list, then you can make sure the content, to your point, it's not a tractor, right? Like if it's to a mountain bike list, then the content should be not just how to care for your mountain bike, when to know you need to service your shock, maybe what are new trails, what are some organizations that they can support, like things that are going to resonate with them. Because if we just hit them with sale after sale after sale, they're either going to ignore it or worse, they're going to unsubscribe. And again, once we lose them, they're lost. You cannot put them back on the list as much as you would like to.
Well, it's really positioning you as a retailer as like the knowledge expert. Like here's advocacy things, here's new trails, here's ways to get involved. And then all the bikes and the equipment and all that other stuff just comes because they want to know what you have to say, and you are the expert and the leader.
Right, or it's tied into something. Like here in Massachusetts, we just passed new legislation that requires that bikes after a certain time have a rear light and a front light, and so that's a perfect time to talk about lights, right? Like but it's tied into something that's of a current event. So we're both supporting what Mass Bike is doing, and we're making sure they understand that we're a resource for those things. So, and again, this should be like the content you feed here should be elsewhere. Like I never want to see people creating content for newsletters necessarily, just like I don't want to see people creating content for social media. It really should be about creating content and distributing it through all the available channels that you have. Sometimes social leads, sometimes content, sometimes email leads, but at the end of the day, they're reflective of each other.
So it's like, this is what we're doing this month, and here are all the places that we can communicate it, and here's
yeah, and tell your stories. Like all your people are out there in their kits. Like you post those pictures to Instagram, put them on your website, and then put them in your newsletter, and be like, hey team, good job. Like you had fun today, and now we're sharing the pictures. Like I think that's the biggest thing. We use Facebook as like this infinite photo album, and so we're always driving traffic to a Facebook page, and we don't own that. So get it onto your site. A little harder, but like drive traffic there. Then you put that in the newsletter, and that drives to your website, and that has the links over to buy a kit, to join the club. And it's just kind of, and again, it's personal. It's oh, I know her. Like I know her. I know that kit. So.
Yeah. So I want to leave some time for Q&A. So I have just a couple more questions that I had for you. Unfortunately, it's not, Scott, it doesn't sound like I'm just going to my Yahoo account and sending an email anymore. It sounds like there's a lot of work here. And I have questions like, how do we know we're doing it right? The frequency that we're reaching out. I have some retailers telling me that they're hitting their email list twice a week right now, and it's working because they're connected.
Bless them.
So how do we know we're doing it right? And, any just thoughts you have on that?
Look, I would, it's an interesting question, because I would almost say that, like, it's got to be right for you. I mean, maybe it's the same idea as riding a bike, and everybody's going to be different, right? If someone gets out there and rides 2 miles once a week, that's like right for them and good for them. And I think it's the same sort of thing. I would step into it and start slow and just say, hey, look, I want to get 3 automations set up, and if I can get 3 automations set up, life is good. I really wouldn't try to say something like, hey, I want to get a newsletter out once a week. A newsletter is a hard thing to put together. And newsletters I've seen, they want like 5 stories, right? Like this story, this story, this story, and you got to scroll. I would just say, like, get something out. As long as you're doing it, you're probably doing it right. And like Kristin said, I think if you don't see the unsubscribe rates increase, then it probably means you're sending something relevant to an audience that really matters. One thing I'd also say is, like, our platform has this revenue attribution tool, and it basically says, like, you sent an email to Heather, and then Heather came into the store and bought something. And how do we know? Because Heather gave her email address to get a receipt. And so we say, okay, that email caused that sale. Do we know it cost it? Not really. Is it likely? Maybe a little, right? It's not perfect. But I think what you can start to say, and this is maybe the thing to believe the most, is, we've got some clients who say, like, that doesn't make any sense at all. It's like showing 80% of our total revenue is what you guys say you're driving. And I think my retort to that would be, like, you're doing it right, because what you're really saying is the people in this database are your customers, and those are the people that are buying from you. And I don't really care if they keep coming in because you're sending them a nice email, or because you treated them so nicely in the store that they respect you. But what you actually are saying is you've got an asset, and it's 4,000 people, and those are the people who keep buying over and over and over again. And I'd say, well, at that point, you're doing it right.
Yeah, the revenue is funny because it's kind of it's a mixed blessing, right? Because you do look at it and you're like, cool, like, this is worth doing. But of course, if you look at it, you're like, well, would that have happened anyway? And you can poke holes into anything. But I would also say, you're not getting that from your Facebook, and I'm pretty sure you're updating your Facebook. Like, you're not getting any of these numbers from your Instagram, and I know you're updating your Instagram. So it's like, in some ways, it's almost like ignorance is bliss. Like, we're doing Facebook because we've been told that that's important and we should do that. But then we give you numbers and you're like, well, that's not true. I don't know if this is worth it. And you're like, it's just completely opposite. And I mean, we've even talked about it, that I'll say, like, send out a newsletter with a big orange bicycle on it. Somebody calls about the orange bicycle, and my husband still says, well, I mean, maybe. Like, how much clearer could it be? So it's, and to your point, Scott, I think also, if they're sending 2 times a week, then 80% of their revenue is going to be associated with, it's going to look like that because they're so frequent. I mean, we tend to do, at this peak time, we're running about 2 newsletters a month. Every 2 weeks is about what I have for content. That doesn't include our daily plays. So we are sending out emails every single day, but those are our automated plays. And then maybe a blast on demand once a month, like as needed once a month. And then as I get slower in the season and slower with our content, we go down to about 1 newsletter a month. I do try to at least get out once a month in front of people.
And it really just tells you, like, how valuable that database is of your customers. Like, it doesn't matter if it's in Ascent or in MailChimp or in Excel, like, that list of people is really, really important.
It's your website and it's your email list. Those are your 2 most important. Like, if somebody were to say to me today, like, give me 2 that I should focus on, social media, website, I would say website and email, because we do not own social media. That is, It's, as somebody once said, it's like building a house on rented land. I'm not saying to give up on it, but if you're like, I got no more bandwidth, like I have nothing left to give, then I would say website, email.
Wow. Okay. So I guess in conclusion, my last question is like the future of data-driven marketing for brick and mortar businesses. Scott, what do you, I mean, you're in the conversations, you're in the thick of it. What do you see for the
Well,
future?
I think what we see is a kind of a ever expanding set of channels as options. And, you know, text messaging is becoming a legitimate option for communication. You know, we're actually building our SMS piece now. But, you know, things like mobile push and website push, right? Those notifications are starting to become a little bit more important. And maybe the actual answer here is that, like, you can't get everybody via email one way or another, right? It's just not possible. So you know, I think the future is effectively what Kristin said, which is like, there's one piece of content, but put it a couple different places. You know, you don't want to rebuild the wheel. If you built sort of a Facebook post that talks about some event you're having, like, send that via email and you know, get it out whichever way you can. So I think that's going to continue.
And Kristin, you're going to continue to move forward with the platform, and you're finding it.
Yeah, I mean, I think our challenge is, again, you know, rolling out more plays, and then also kind of as they mature, right? Like someone has seen it, so making sure it's fresh, making sure I'm not just pushing the same message again and again and again, like maybe at their 5th visit or their 10th visit or something like that, like working out, okay, how many times has this email been seen? How many times? Now what? Now what? Kind of like, now what do I do? And really not so much a sent, but on the Lightspeed side, like making sure that our database can help us be as flexible as possible, right? Whether that's collecting mailing addresses, because we don't really do that, collecting birthdays, we definitely don't do that, collecting email addresses on our Saturday service. Like, these are all things that we're constantly looking at, like, how can we build the database so that so I have more to work with.
Right. Once you realize the power of the data, you're like, let's get.
Yeah, you're like, wouldn't it be great if, like I've always said, like, wouldn't it be great if, you know, he put, because it's in there somewhere, like, oh, the Specialized whatever had a recall, be awesome for me to pull a list that says, hey guys, like, we're not a Specialized dealer, but your bike has a recall and this is what you should do now. Like, that would be cool, right? Like, that'd be so cool to be able to say as a service, like, maybe you missed it because you don't read every bike related email that we do. So, you know, the data is locked in there, but just like, where is it? Well, it's in the notes field. I was like, okay, we need to move that somewhere where it's more searchable.
Excellent. Okay. So I think at this point, Rochelle, do you want to jump on and get the questions that have been put into the chat to our experts? And then if anyone else has questions, please put them in chat now, and we'll take this opportunity to answer anything.
Absolutely. So we have one straight away, and then I would encourage anyone that has a question to put it in the chat or in the question and answer portion. The one that's in there right now is, how do you keep your email from going straight to the spam filter?
Yeah, I'll answer that. So there's 3 things that regulate this. The first is the reputation of the IP address, and that's actually something that Ascent manages, and we do monitor them and make sure the reputation is good. Basically, what reputation means is that when those emails end up in people's inboxes, do they click on it or open them, or do they hit the spam button? And if they hit the spam button, like, you're sending the wrong stuff, right? But that IP reputation is important. This is a really minor one. The second factor is, like, the content. It can't have lots of bad words,
Exclamation points and dollars and millions, and your content can get flagged.
The more you write free in your email, the more it's going to go to spam. And then the final one, and this is probably what you'll find is the most interesting of them, is that the way that this is being monitored today is, let's just say that when you send an email, it goes to 1,000 people that have Gmail addresses. Gmail will actually take the 1,000, put them into quarantine, and they'll let 25 through. And if people don't open, auto delete, or click the spam on, let's just say 14 out of the 25, they'll put all 1,000 into the spam filter. And what you're really saying is, like, you want your content to be compelling enough that, like, people don't do that. Now, I don't think it's a huge issue in this industry, right? It gets a lot harder in other, like the restaurant industry, right? Who wants an email from Red Lobster? But I think those are the three things. So didn't mean to go on.
Yeah, and there's a technical piece to this too that Scott can probably speak to, but on your domain record, you set up something called an SPF record, and that basically says to the whole world, Ascent 360 has permission to send on my behalf. Otherwise, it'll look like, info at Steve the Bike Guy from Ascent 360. So it's not hard to set up. It's a little technical, but when somebody says you need your SPF record set up, it's not something to blow off, because that is really telling all the world Ascent 360 has permission to use my email. Otherwise, it could look like they're spoofing you. Right. And that's another one that can trigger jump. And there's a difference between spam and what Google would call promotions or updates, right? Like, that's a different tab. You'd love it to be in the first tab, likely not going to end up there. That's fine. But like being marked as spam, danger. Right. That's what we're looking to avoid.
That's not.
Excellent. Next question is, what is the process like when somebody signs up for Ascent 360 with creating the segmentation lists? What does that look like? How long does it take?
So it really depends on what system you're using. But if you're using like Ascend, Lightspeed, it's actually just a couple of days to suck the data in. We automatically create like 14 segments for you, and then there's an onboarding and training session as well. And what we do is try to ask you, hey, we'd suggest you get 3 plays up and running, or 3 of these automations, and these are the ones that we'd recommend. You might say, I want to do some other things, so we'll definitely handhold you through the beginning of the process. We actually call that onboarding, and we have a metric internally that says how many clients are in onboarding, and that then once you're done with onboarding, we're effectively pushing you out of the nest, and hopefully you fly. But we're always available, for more questions, and we do have this sort of idea of time with a specialist, which some of our clients actually take advantage of, and others oddly don't. So
yeah, we had a little bit of an extra, and this will be for a lot of people too. We had our Lightspeed, that was fast because that was automated, but then we had our MailChimp account, and so we really wanted to bring all of those emails over, including our opt-outs, because I did not want to get yelled at from somebody that had opted out. And then it was just more of a little bit of a manual process for me to go through and be like, okay, this guy's here twice, this email belongs to this person. We don't have a huge database. I was able to do that, but so remember, you have other sources of emails. I'm not saying to scrape your address book, but I am saying that there are places that you probably have email addresses. Like we had HubSpot we were using for appointment requests, we had MailChimp, and then we had Lightspeed. Lightspeed had probably the least emails because that wasn't we weren't doing that. So I had to kind of like, that's where ours has matured, where they were like, here's just a bunch of emails. Hopefully they'll stick.
Looks like our last question here is somebody writing in saying that they saw a promotion for a new free trial or something like that. Can you speak to that, Scott?
Yes. So we do have a 30-day free trial. It's if you use Lightspeed, Shopify, BigCommerce, WooCommerce, and I think we are including Ascend in that. And then you just get to use our platform for 30 days for free. And hopefully you'll love it and sign up.
Excellent. And I just put into the chat contact information for Heather at Ascent 360. And I actually just looked up that link too, which I think is to the 30-day trial, and I put that in the chat too. So it's all in there. Scott, Kristin, thank you so much. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know we people
realized I forgot to say what I was supposed to say.
Oh, Heather's gonna get
I
in trouble.
apologize for this, Heather. If people do that, sign up for a free trial, Ascent is donating $50 per to NBDA.
Oh, wow. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. That's
Yeah, I totally spaced on that. I hope Heather already talked to you about that. I apologize. So if you do sign up, like, you're doing good for the NBDA.
That's really kind of you, and such a great platform for our members. And Kristin, thank you for volunteering your time, as a member, as a retailer, as an expert in marketing. I hope that everyone who attended today found a lot of value in this conversation. And Scott, I mean, you and your team, you guys have been fantastic partners. So thank you. And what a nice offer. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, this has been a blast. I appreciate you setting it up.
Lots of good information. If anyone has any questions that weren't answered in the conversation today, please send me a note and I'll make sure to get back to you with an answer. I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Kristin. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye now.